It's like looking for that idea that will stick.
And generally a process of accretion, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's little by little, and I used to finish a book and just like literally the next day start a new one. I'd write 30 pages and then get bored, and then write 60 pages of a new idea, and I get bored, and I do this over and over again. I have like so many unfinished novels in my computer. It's ridiculous. So I'm not an organized writer, um, an energetic one maybe, or I make a lot of words,
Yeah.
but it takes a lot of words in order for me to begin on with the right idea. It takes a long time. In terms of a book like Communist Daughter, Bethune is his own narrator. He's telling the story about his life. The biggest resistance the book got here was that certain like most I think non-literary readers really want to make a sort of an easy emotional connection with the character, and Bethune is not an easy guy to like in my book, nor was he in real life. But in fiction in this country, sadly, it's very important if you want to sell some copies to have a sympathetic character at the center of your book. Now, I think that's hogwash. I think it's a terrible limitation, and a pandering to the readership if you intentionally create a sympathetic and likable protagonist or narrator for your book. If your narrator or protagonist is naturally and essentially and necessarily a likable character, great. But if you go hunting for a likable character to tell a story, then I think you're not really being very genuine with the artistic process. Whenever I'm sort of feeling a bit sort of spinning my wheels in terms of writing, I realize that it's because I'm not reading something, So whenever I remind myself of that, and whenever I realize, oh my God, things aren't going well, it's because I haven't read something that really excites me lately. Yeah, so I think the reading is the greatest inspiration.
Does your work influence your reading?
My reading influences my work. Yeah.
Do you look for specific books?
I do.
when you're
If I'm
working?
writing in first person, I won't read third, and vice
Okay.
versa. There always has to be some technical and emotional resonance and connection with what I'm trying to do.
And
always.
you need to immerse yourself within the model that you're working
Yeah.
with, really, and not get distracted.
From the early pages of the Ash Garden. In 1995, so he was part of the project that built the atomic bomb, and as an older man in 1995, he's gotten into the habit of every year on the anniversary of the bomb delivering a lecture, and his agenda is really to provide his own reasons to justify his actions. But we learn later on that he's beginning to reach deeper into his heart and soul. He becomes more and more sensitive, I guess, to the idea that he may have lived his life in a way that was not possibly the best sort of life he could have. Anton Boll, Professor Emeritus, knew how to capture his audience's attention. After years of public speaking, he had found that a slight hint of contrition at the beginning of such an address helped to prepare the point about to be made. He'd been a pillar at the Niels Bohr Memorial Lecture Series, most often held at Columbia and the New School, but also for a number of years at NYU since participating in the Pugwash Conference in Nova Scotia 38 years earlier. He was an old hand, a polished performer. At 77, he was practically as old as the various lecture halls he brought his message to. And even to those who knew neither him nor his work and reputation, it was easy enough to see, listening to one of his talks, that he was a man with a particular and unforgiving point, which was that the nightmare, terrible as it had been, would always be overshadowed by the majesty of the dream. The pivotal event of the 20th century continues to resonate today, he said, regardless of race and nationality, age, and ideology. We have one and all been touched by this nightmare. Permit me now, however, to comment on the nature and necessity of the dream in relation to its darker brother. Come August, he liked to keep his eye on things down here in New York. In private conversations, he said he wanted to ensure that the truth was being told, and considered his participation part of his duty to those who could not defend themselves, or the time they had spent in the world doing the things which had won them such distinction. These people generally did not have names. Some were dead colleagues whom he never mentioned directly in any of his talks or lectures or conversations. They were not specific people really, nor were people the point. The focus, more accurately, was on the ideas these people had represented and fought for in their living years, which he still held dearly and even desperately to his heart. So every August, he guaranteed himself a room at the Gramercy Park Hotel and mounted from there his defense against those whose peculiar and highly personalized sense of the world would rewrite the history he had seen, lived through, and helped shape. The Ash Garden at the very early stage, he was an old pyromaniac. He had nothing to do with the bomb, with the war, and I knew, well, and then he became a German scientist, So, and it was a surprise when it happened, and it's a lovely surprise. So, my advice to myself and anyone who cares to listen is, if your character surprises you, let it happen and see where it goes, because I think the books that don't work are the ones that are overly managed, right? Are the ones where you can tell the writer had it all in his head before he set off on the journey. It becomes kind of like an exercise of manipulation, right? And there's a very limited feel of truth and organic growth in the characters. It all seems managed,
Let's ask our final question. Franz Kafka said the writer's greatest desire is to narrate his own funeral. W.C. Fields proposed that his epitaph should read, "All things considered, I'd rather be in Philadelphia." What would you like your epitaph to read?
I think I'd be really sentimental and say something about my kids. Maybe that's a letdown. It's not very clever. I don't know. We at the end of your life, it's not about the things you've done. It's not the resume. It's not, he climbed Everest and he wrote 7 books and solved world hunger. It's how people remember you, and that's, I guess, what I, in my good moments, aspire to be a person who inspires good friendships, I guess.
I like that. Wow, Dennis Bock, thank you again.
My pleasure.
You've been great. Let's hear it for Dennis Bock.
the Ash Garden at the very early stage. He was an old pyromaniac. He had nothing to do with the bomb, with the war, and I knew, well, and then he became a German scientist, So, and it was like, it was a surprise when it happened, and it's a lovely surprise. So, my advice to myself and anyone who cares to listen is, if your character surprises you, let it happen and see where it goes, because I think the books that don't work are the ones that are overly managed, right? Are the ones that where you can tell the writer had it all in his head before he set off on the journey. It becomes kind of like an exercise of manipulation, right? And there's a very limited feel of truth and organic growth in the characters. It all seems managed. in the Ash Garden. I had written these two characters, Emiko the victim and Anton Boll the scientist, and I had sort of like two big chunks, and the question was, it's like one of the problems you're always struggling with as a writer is how to get your characters in the same room so they can, butt heads. And I had no idea how to do that. I had Emiko in Japan, with her world exploded. And I had Anton Boll in America, in Canada, sort of dealing with the consequences of the fallout of the bomb, the moral, ethical considerations. And I had no idea how to put them in the same room together. And then I came here. I was leafing through some books in the stacks, and I stumbled across the truth. And the truth was 16 survivors of the bomb, teenage girls, were invited to New York for facial reconstruction. As I would never have thought that was possible, because my God, out of a whole city, 16 girls. I don't know. It was stranger than fiction, and so I used that, of course, right? So the reality solved that problem for me. The true historical fact of bringing these 16 kids over in 1955, I guess it was, just floored me, and immediately I knew that's how I was going to get my two characters together.
Wow, Dennis Bock, thank you again.
My
You've
pleasure.
been great. Let's hear it for Dennis Bock.